This was a requested tutorial. The keys I'm using are in the bottom right corner of the viewport. We first need to establish a base for the stadium. Move the default cube on top of the 3D cursor and set the origin to the 3D cursor. This means that our scaling will be done from the 3D cursor. Scale the cube along the z-axis. This will be the ground. Then scale the cube along the x and y axis just to make it a bit larger. Apply the scale using Ctrl-A. Add a bevel modifier to round the edges. For the actual base of the stadium, add a cylinder with 16 vertices and a triangle fan cap. Move the cylinder on top of the cube and then scale it along the x and y axis. And apply the scale. In edit mode, inset the top faces, and extrude them down along the z-axis. This will provide thickness to the stadium walls. Select the inner edges, then extrude them with the E key, but don't move the edges. Simply hit your Enter key. Now you can scale the edge inward to form the canopy at the top of the stadium. Now extrude the new edge down along the z-axis to give the illusion of thickness. Select the inner faces of the canopy and move them down along the z-axis to add some curvature to the canopy. For the seating, we won't be making individual seats, but instead we'll make simple decks where the seats will be placed. Add 3 horizontal loop cuts to the stadium, both on the outside and the inside. Move them down along the z-axis so the bottom edge loop is just above the ground level. Select the inner faces using Alt-E, extrude the faces inward to start forming the decks. Select the front edge loop of the bottom deck section and move it down along the z-axis to make the wall between the pitch and the seating. Select the front edge loop for the other decks and move them down along the z-axis to make the slope of the seating areas. Select every other vertical edge and add a bevel with Ctrl-B. These will be the stairs. Select the faces associated with the pitch and extrude them up along the Z-axis so they're not hidden by the ground. Using the knife tool that you can get to with the K key, make horizontal and vertical edges in the center of the pitch to represent the playing area. Subdivide the horizontal vertices and move the center vertices to make two separate areas. For the white lines, add two horizontal edges. Then select these new edges and add a small bevel. This will help when we add some materials. For the entrance, select a few faces from the outside of the building and extrude them along their normals. Select the top faces and inset them. Then extrude these inset faces down along the Z-axis. Select the horizontal edge near the bottom of the extruded faces and dissolve them by right-clicking and choose Dissolve Edges. Select the two front faces and inset them. To inset them separately, hit the I key twice. Add a vertical edge loop to the center of each of the inset faces. Select the edge that is part of the door and add a small bevel. Select the four faces of the doors and inset them again. Then extrude them back toward the stadium along their normals. Select the top and bottom edge loops of the stadium and the entrance. and add a bevel with Ctrl B. In Object Mode, add a text object. In Edit Mode, change the text to whatever you like. Under the Geometry tab, add an extrusion and a bevel. In Object Mode, right-click on the text and convert it to a mesh. Rotate the object around the x-axis 90 degrees and place it on top of the stadium entrance. Using Ctrl A, apply all the transforms. For the stadium lights, add a cylinder with 8 vertices. Since these will be thin, we don't need as many vertices as the stadium. Move the cylinder on top of the ground and scale the cylinder along the X and Y axis and apply the scale. Move the cylinder into place and tab into Edit Mode. In Edit Mode, select the top faces and move them up along the Z-axis to the correct height. Select the bottom faces and scale them along the X and Y axis. Select the top faces and extrude them up along the Z-axis. And then scale these new faces along the X and Y axis. Add a cube and scale it to the proper size for the light. Rotate the light so it's facing inward toward the stadium and place it on the light pole. Change the transform orientation to normal. This will allow you to scale and rotate along the normals of the object. Scale the bottom face so it's just a bit larger than the light pole. Rotate the light so it's angled toward the inside of the stadium. Select the front face, inset it, and extrude back toward the center of the light. In object mode, set the origin to the 3D cursor. In edit mode, select the entire light object and change the transform orientation back to global. Select the Spin Duplicates tool and click on the blue curve. In the spin options, change the steps, which is the number of lights, and the angle should be changed to 240. In object mode, rotate and scale the lights as needed. And select all your objects and apply all the transforms. And add a bevel modifier to round the edges. I'll be using the palette from Infenzia for my materials. The link is in the description. Open the UV editor and the shader editor. Then drag your palette or whatever you're using into the shader editor and connect it to the principled shader. You can also change the roughness to 1 if you wish. Open the palette in the UV editor. Make sure you change to material preview so you can see your materials. Select the ground and tab into edit mode. Select the entire mesh, and in the UV editor, select the UVs and scale them to 0. Then move the UVs to the desired material. Select the lights and open the material from the drop-down menu. In edit mode, select the entire mesh, and in the UV editor, select the UVs and scale them to 0. Move the UVs to the desired material. You can also move the UVs for specific faces to a different material. Then repeat this process for each object.